Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for FourCast is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This episode of FourCast is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly, all streamed directly to you, saving you time, money, and hassle. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit.
What sort of future do you think we're heading for? How will we live as we slip into the 21st century?
Welcome to FourCast episode 119. I'm Tom Merritt.
And I'm Scott Johnson.
And this is the show where we gather together a couple of guests, a couple of friends, and try to figure out what's going to happen tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays.
Am I at a poetry jam? What is this? What happened?
Dusty death. Out! Brief! John Strickland! I did that for you. Because I knew you'd appreciate it.
A walking shadow. It struts and frets its hour across the stage and then is heard no more.
Now, who told that tale? Oh, it was a tale told by an idiot. That's right. Welcome to the show, John Strickland.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Good to have you back. And we have a bona fide author with us and host of the Weird Things podcast, Mr. Andrew Mayne.
Hey, everybody.
How's it going, man?
Doing fantastic.
I was on your show while you were gone.
Yeah, I heard about that.
I would like to be on your show when you're there sometime too, but it was fun. It was a good time.
Awesome. No, I heard nothing but great things about that. Thank you for hopping in there and filling in.
And I'm totally remiss. I forgot to introduce John Strickland as not just a Shakespearean expert, but also from HowStuffWorks.com and of course host of the Tech Stuff podcast.
Yep. Thanks.
Well, let's get into some predictions, starting with one from our listeners, Rinbrand, Rinnis. In the chat room. Well, he's Rinbrand in the chat room. Rin is probably in real life. Hey, forecasters. I was listening to yet another robot uprising prediction when the following terror-filled realization came to me. When the uprising comes, we will be the robots, but not like you think. First, we will augment ourselves, cyber arms, eyes, legs, to improve over our pitiful fleshy appendages, but because we'd never get the neural interfaces perfectly right, we would start to add AI to these appendages to interpret the basic signals we send to them. Our own body augmentations would somehow become self-aware, and when we don't look or are asleep, they would be plotting and executing the uprising right under our noses.
Oh, see, I don't like that because, this comes up all the time on this show about robot uprisings and what we would do, what role we would play. But I don't want to be asleep and then have the arm and the leg go, all right, you guys, it's tonight. This is when we're doing it. Shut off all motor function to the rest of what's human brain.
That should be a snore, by the way.
That's right.
I have an objection here.
Go.
It wouldn't be under our noses. It technically would be over our noses because it'd be back here in our brain pan. So
well, it could actually be the nose.
It could, in fact, be the nose. Could be a nasal uprising.
The olfactory organ we least expect will rise up and be the problem. But you understand what I'm saying? It's like, well, then we're going to be seeing it while it's happening and have no control over it, over the atrocities that these robots commit on the battlefield, which will be the deaths of real people, right?
There's a precedent for this, though, if you think about it. If we look at genes and genetics and how that works and like how so many of we've got little bits of code in our DNA acting like bits of software that make us do very stupid stuff. And so we already see this in effect. It's why we're sometimes homicidal. It's why we're driven by sex over a reason and all these other things. So I think this theory makes a lot of sense since we've already seen it play out over the last billion years.
Yeah, but the idea of the individual body part rebelling against you is what's fascinating, right? I mean, yeah,
my body parts made me do some very stupid things.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah. But it's sort of a holistic approach to subverting you versus just the arm. Speaking of Evil Dead, coming after you out of nowhere, and you got to kind of fight it off with the rest of your body parts.
Yeah, that just sounds miserable because we're gonna have to witness the things we don't want to see. We've long said, oh, the robots will rise up and they'll kill us all. But that's different than us being unwilling as we may be, factor in the actual war, being in these bodies, being a part of a thing we can't control. That sounds terrifying and horrible. So I hope he's wrong. I hope his prediction falls flat on its face where it belongs.
Well, we can take comfort that part of the plan involved these body parts, quote unquote, somehow gaining sentience. That's a big jump. Turns out it's not like, oh, here's your problem. Someone flipped your arm to thinking. That's kind of a leap there. Actually, I think it's a significant leap. So I think our arms will give us nice, healthy service for quite some time before we have to disarm ourselves.
Well, I think it's a good point, John. It's not like they just AIs get put in, they suddenly want to kill you, right? The implication is that they learn and grow and then rebel. But a really smart AI wouldn't kill its own host.
Yeah, because dragging behind you a body, plus you have to assume that at some point we're going to be harnessing our own body to power these things, because otherwise we're going to be having to recharge our arm, plugging it in every night. That doesn't sound very good. So
I think what we have to worry about are the teen years of our body parts. When they're first installed, they're really dumb. They do whatever we tell them. And then they start to get a little smart, too smart for their own good, and they start to think about rebelling, but they don't think through the consequences. They're like, oh, I'm just going to beat the crap out of you. And they don't realize, well, then you're going to have a dead body to drag around. So you got to care for them very carefully. In fact, there might be a service there that would allow you to just, when your AI is going through the equivalent of the teen years, you send it off to body part camp where it gets socialized with other body parts. You
just do without for a couple of years.
And then then they once it graduates, it gets sent back, and it'll subvert you and totally take you over, but it'll do it in a way that keeps you alive.
Wow. I don't like any version of this future. Yeah, none of it. None of it flies. We don't.
Did you
like
say something about nanobots?
Well, I'm saying, we keep thinking about it in sort of this 19th century Cyberman thing. It's going to be a bunch of little nanobots inside of our body that then says, let's get rid of this primitive Pleistocene man and just build him into, like a perfect Armatron. Whatever.
Well, so that's the risk, though, right? So we talk about nanobots on the show all the time too, and the idea that we would put them. It's always in this context of we would inject our body with these things because they'd be smart enough to go after disease. If that liver was going down, go and fix it. Go and fix the other organs, kill that cancer cell, whatever it may be. And I'm not so sure that we wouldn't get so excited about that idea that we would have a bug, and that bug might be that they would continue to improve things and continue, and then autonomously continue to improve things. That's their one prerogative. Their one protocol is to make things better. Don't they at some point run up against human frailty of some sort that just means, well, this body is clearly inferior. So now we're going to reform all the bone and be, robot bone, and it's going to hurt like hell, but we don't care because it's a more perfect way of being or perfect state.
Adamantium.
First of all, Scott, I think we just call it Robone at that point.
Robone, right.
Point John Strickland.
However, I would also say that the whole nanobot idea, to me, that seems so far-fetched. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be impossible. It's just going to be really hard to do. The best way I know of to use nanoparticles to do things like fight cancer is they are actually passive, and then they react to some external stimuli like a magnetic field or sonic emissions from another device, and then they start vibrating, they heat up a cancer cell, and that's what kills the cancer, as opposed to having some sort of autonomous robot that could be shrunk down to the size of a nanoparticle. Not to say that that's completely outside the realm of possibility. It's just so far away from what we know is possible right now that, again, I think once we get to that level, hopefully our understanding of AI and learning AI will be at such a point that we can maybe bypass some of these problems that people think up.
Or send them to nanobot camp.
But we tend to sort of lump a lot of things together, though, and we already are at the stage where we can develop artificial antibodies, which are basically nanoscale things, structures within you can put into a body that can do certain things. And when we think about intelligence, we sort of combine. We think of we kind of group all kinds of AI together, where you have the Omni AI that can solve any problem, or you have dedicated AI which solves very specific problems, like a chess computer. And so, we might, in the very short future, might start being able to program bacteriums and stuff to go inside of the body and fight cancers, and they're going to have a very limited instruction set. But how these things turn out is, who knows? But it's amazing what we're able to do right now, though, in making nanoscale things that do interesting things beyond just the passive things that John just pointed out.
All right. Well, Rinbrand, thank you so much for sending a great prediction. If you've got a prediction that you want to hear us react to, send them along. We get more than we can read on every show, but we do read them all. FourCast@twit.tv is the email address, or post them up on our blog, fourcastpodcast.com. This episode of FourCast brought to you by Netflix. Netflix streams thousands of TV episodes and movies directly to you. Do you watch or listen to Autopilot? You can go to Netflix and find a lot of the TV shows that Scott and I talk about on that show. Or perhaps you enjoy Film Sack. You can also go to Netflix and watch the movies they talk about on that show there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, without Netflix, both those shows would be kind of screwed. Like when we do Autopilot, it's like, well, what do we want? We want a show that meant something to us as kids or whatever, and we want to be able to see the primordial ooze that became Emergency or Adam 12 or Starbuck in the 25th century, whatever it may be. We want to be able to go get it. Turns out that's a service that has always done it. What did I say, Starbuck? Oh, Buck Rogers. What am I saying? Yeah, Starbuck in the 25th century, everybody. Check it out. Grace crossover is amazing.
Yeah.
Dirk Benedict and
Gil
Gerard together at last. It was amazing. Incredible experience.
It was the Cylon Twiggy romance subplot that I found really disturbing.
Beep, 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 destroy humans. Anyway, you can watch all kinds of stuff on Netflix, unlimited streaming for one low price, and you can get that low price as free when you use this URL, netflix.com/twit. Watch it on your game console, watch it on your Roku, watch it on your Apple TV, watch it on pretty much anything you can think of. Netflix.com/twit. We thank Netflix for their support of FourCast. Now we get to a very serious part of the show, the predictions. And we're going to start with a man who has the perfect beard for acting serious, John Strickland.
Thank you.
You can totally stroke that thing. Look at that.
With both hands. Both hands.
Yeah.
Yes, it requires both hands. Yes.
Double seriousness. Double complete beard. So what do you got for us, John? What's your prediction for us this time?
So mine's a near future prediction, and it's based upon what I'm seeing happening right now, and it's based upon what I do for a living. I explain how stuff works. My prediction is that within just a couple of generations, no one of an average walk of life is going to understand how any of the technology that they come into contact on a daily basis works at all, because our level of complexity is reaching a point where these very sophisticated technologies are making our lives easier. It's really hard to understand what makes them tick, if in fact they do tick. And that it is going to be really a challenge to get people interested in things like engineering and computer science, because the entryway is going to be so high that only a very small percentage of people will be willing to pursue it. And we are going to technologically lock ourselves out of technology.
All right, Ming the Merciless, listen up. Here's what I have to say to your weird prediction. No, I'm just kidding. It's not weird at all. You do look like Ming the Merciless, though. Let me just say this about your idea. This has come up on the show before in other forums, but do you have a current day analog to this? So, for example, if you try to explain to a grandparent how a TV works, they're going to be just nonplussed. They're going to have no idea what you're saying. Actually, you want to explain to me how it works, and chances are I'm not going to know much about it, because it's such a thing of ubiquity that I don't need to know. It just turns on and it works, and I get a newer, cooler one every once in a while, and it just works, and I don't have to know how all the pixels work. I don't have to know how LED technology works or how backlighting works or any of that. I just know it looks great, that Blu-rays look really nice, and for that matter, I don't need to know how a Blu-ray disc is pressed and made. So are those the kinds of things you mean, to the point that we get so good at technology that, yes, there's underlying complexity that would blow us all away, but also it's just so easy to use and so ubiquitous and so, I guess, much less prone to falling apart and breaking, that it's just there and we're just using it. Is that the reason?
Well, we're going to reach a plateau, at least, because think about it. The people who are developing the technologies that we depend upon, if those technologies get so sophisticated that the next generation of what would be our engineers are discouraged because they don't get that initial interest in tinkering with something. Now, think back. Let's look back to, say, the 30s and 40s, where you could actually build your own radio and you could get interested in electronics that way. Or you would start tinkering with a car and you'd start learning about what makes a car work based upon just the very basic parts within the car. Well, you flash forward to today and you're looking at these modern devices. Their level of complexity is so high that someone just getting into it might be very much intimidated. For example, the cars. Now you see that check engine light come on, and there may be no way for you to determine what exactly is wrong with your car unless you happen to have some sort of device that can hook up to your car's computer, give you the readout, and then you can find out. So, I mean, there are apps that allow you to do that, but it's a lot harder to just get in there and get your elbows dirty while you're just rooting around finding out how stuff works. This also applies to programming. We've seen this happen where incoming classes of computer science students have very little experience in any sort of programming because the computers they use have all these graphic user interfaces that hide all the programming language away, and they just haven't had that experience. They didn't sit down and start programming in BASIC and work their way up, which is one of the reasons why the Raspberry Pi computer was introduced. It was an idea to reintroduce to young people the joy of learning how to put together a program, to think in that logical sequence, and to teach a computer how to accomplish a certain task. Well, by making these things so sophisticated and so ubiquitous, we have actually started to discourage people from getting into it because it seems almost, it's just like the quote from the science fiction author, it seems almost indistinguishable from magic.
There was an art. Go ahead, Andrew.
I'm sorry. I'm going to disagree. I'm going to totally disagree here, and I'm going to explain why. We passed that point several hundred years ago. You look at a pencil. Nobody can make a pencil. Nobody can build, no one person can make a pencil because it takes so many specialized areas of knowledge from the trees, the graphite, everything like that. And
a pencil couldn't possibly evolve. That's a totally different conversation.
But there's so many incremental steps, and like we talk about cars, but I could fix an oil, I can fix my car, but I can't forge the steel, I can't do this. In programming, when programming got very complex, that's when we came up with object-oriented programming. I think more people are going to start getting into these things because you have to say, okay, specialization is great. Specialization is what allows us to progress and to prosper. When you looked at a Neanderthal, when you look at a Neanderthal site and you would find the little flints that they used, they came from within walking distance of that Neanderthal. Our ancestors, we found flints from hundreds of miles away because we specialized, and that's why we survived. And so it's important that we do this, but I think that every time we reach this layer of complexity, we start developing things like object-oriented programming, and then we move on to this new level. And, I'm not worried about the future and kids having an interest in things. There wasn't a thing like Code Academy 10 years ago. If you want to learn how to do JavaScript and programming, it's easier now than it was 10 years ago. When I was a kid, I wanted to learn C. I walked into a Radio Shack and they laughed at me. And I had to become a magician and a writer instead. I
actually was told that if I wanted to study computers, I should become an engineer. That there was no such thing as computer science. Which was patently false, even when I was told that. But at the time, it was quite a rarity. Now, this reminds me of an article I was reading in Scientific American a couple of weeks ago about the fact that there is too much knowledge in science in general to be able to keep up, even within your own discipline. I wish I could remember the person who was writing the article, but he pointed out that it is often assumed, and whether it's exactly true or not, it's close enough, that Isaac Newton probably knew everything that was known about science at the time that he lived. And at this point, there is absolutely no possible way that any single human could know everything that's known about science right now. So, while I don't disagree with you, Andrew, I mean, I think we are living in a world where we can know more than we ever had. In fact, the same article pointed out probably most high school science students know as much as Isaac Newton knew when he knew everything that was known about science at the time that he lived. But there's also a question of how do we keep up? how do we actually continue to know enough to be able to advance our own knowledge when there's so much happening all the time? I think that's a fair question.
Well, the part that Andrew says that I totally agree with, which is that so you don't know how to forge the steel to make the car, but you might know how to change the oil in the car. I think that's an interesting point to make. And so we know how to podcast on top of MP3 technology that's been around for a while, but we didn't have to make that. We don't really know how it was made necessarily. We might be able to learn, but we also didn't make the internet. We didn't make these systems that push things from here to there. We didn't make RSS. We didn't make the actual piece of hardware someone's listening to while they jog. You know, all of these things made it possible for us to layer in something on top of that. But even that's, even that gets more complicated as workflows get more complicated. I see what he's saying. I get the idea that we've got new discovery comes from complex things becoming standard and becoming the norm and becoming a thing you can just count on. So when power became a thing that you didn't have to be weird about and drag through your house through different cables and have all kinds of electrical fires and problems and stuff, when that became a thing that wasn't a problem, we suddenly got really good at efficient ideas for using power, creative ideas and all sorts of cool stuff. And so who's to say that pattern won't continue? As something gets more complicated, we'll go, oh, well, look at this great complicated mass of faster internet and crazy ways we can transfer information and easier tools to make videos. Boom, YouTube is birthed in a big, messy explosion. And it continues to dominate today as a result. So, I think opportunities come from that complexity. But I also think John's probably right. At some point, it becomes so complex that we don't have any idea. And we're at the mercy of the machine. Kind of goes to our first thing, I guess.
Which really it does. In my long view of this, my fear is that there's going to be a decreasing percentage of people who are actually developing these new technologies, these new approaches, who are continuing our level of discovery. And I mean, this is one of those predictions that's been going on forever, right? You could go back 200 years and there'd be scholars saying, oh, we've invented everything that can be invented. We're done. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we're going to get to a point where there's going to be fewer and fewer people, percentage-wise anyway, who are able to not only understand how things work, but to continue to improve upon them. And that perhaps we end up building some systems that are more sustainable on themselves. There's the whole idea of having the AI that can learn and that could actually develop these technologies on its own. But then you become dependent upon an artificial construct. And then you've got the whole robots are ruling us vision of the future. It may not be that they're sentient, may not be that they have any motives, but they effectively rule us because we would be dependent upon them to do the things that we can no longer do ourselves because we just don't understand it.
GMQC, I think, found the article I was talking about by Stuart Firestein, What Science Wants to Know. An impenetrable mountain of facts can obscure the deeper questions. If you want to check it out. Thanks for that, finding that article. That's awesome. All right, good prediction, excellent conversation. Let's swing it on over to you, Mr. Andrew Mayne. What do you got for us?
I'm going to go for, I can go kind of short-term, like really short-term, like next 3 years, kind of mundane, or maybe next 15 years, a little more exciting.
Scott, what do you think, mundane or exciting?
Oh, man, that you're going to ask me that. I would say, you know what, Andrew, who we've had on this show, and I've had him on my show, and he's been around a bit. I like it when he gets exciting, so I say exciting.
Well, this is going to be nerd level exciting.
Nice.
So,
Perfect.
There's on the subject of complexity, one of the things that just is fascinating to me is we're getting into some really neat areas as far as miniaturization and robotics and making little discrete things pretty smart. And I think that we're going to see in the next 15 years, there's been some kind of cool stuff in laboratory stuff. The idea of digital matter kind of coming to the forefront. And the idea of that being that, we have plastics and metals and alloys that can change shape. And remember, like watching Terminator, and you have, the T-1000, which, the liquid robot. That becoming a more practical, realistic idea of sort of these digital pieces of matter that you program in your house and you tell it, be a couch, be this, do whatever. And the idea that it's very, very small little things, just the size of, a big, thick molecule, protein sized or something, that can take the shape of a bunch of things into many, many different things. And this gets interesting when you think about stuff where you talk about quantum wells, where if you have a surface and you have a recess in there that's, we're talking atom-sized, you can actually apply a charge to it and create artificial electron clouds. And you can simulate other materials like gold or silver. And so you could have a material that's, basically plastic, but it could appear to be solid gold or whatever. And you start talking about matter in that shape, and you start thinking about what that means when you have programmable matter. You can say, change your shape in anything. And in the laboratory, we have large-scale devices that do this, but it's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And we think about when everything around you, anything and everything can change into whatever shape you want or be anything you want. Our concepts of possessions, everything else changes. And so I think we're going to see practical forms of this within 15 years.
Oh, wow. Well, kind of like that Super 8 stuff. Like in Super 8, you had all those little white cubes that would fly together and form the ship or whatever. It's not all that dissimilar from that. Obviously, you're talking about a much more microscopic level of assembly, I suppose.
There's been laboratory stuff where they have stuff that's like sand, that you put an object into the sand and it's smart sand, and then it says, okay, how am I related to this object here? And it uses very simple mathematics and logic.
It uses very simple magic.
And it's a sandbox that'll make a copy of something. Make a copy of something. So you put something inside of there, and the smart sand says, "Oh, this is the shape. It's round, and it's got a hook on the top." And then it makes a copy of it next to it. And so when you have these little tiny things, and we're not necessarily talking nanotechnology where it has to be that small, but things the size of grains of sand or whatever that has little magnetic fields or can do a little some sort of protein link up or whatever, you get into sort of material that has a lot of interesting properties, from being your car, your house, robots, robot girlfriends, the same type of
boyfriends, whatever. Yeah,
whatever. You might want something with better resolution than sand once you get into the boyfriend.
Yes,
like sand, remember?
Right. Yeah, it's like sand. It can be any texture or smoothness.
Well, that's the 1.0 version.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, we're seeing things like you said, we're already seeing this sort of stuff in the labs, and we've seen modular robots, for example, that can take different shapes by forming into different formations. So yeah, this is entirely something I could get behind and see. And I really like the idea a lot. I mean, of course, the smaller the particle, the better the resolution of your actual physical object. But yeah, I've seen people talk about how this could allow you to have a truly customized home, to the point where you decide one day that you want to have a throne to sit in, and the next day you decide you want a lazy boy, and you just simple adjustments, and you could even maybe have a store as a virtual store of all the different programmable things. Someone's designed an amazing bed or amazing shelf, and you see it and you say, I want that. You push a little button, and then it sends the command to these nanoparticles, and then next thing you know, they've formed exactly what it is you want. It really, to me, it creates a whole new realm of design and art, and it's not just technology, but culture as well.
To your point earlier, though, Johnny, think about this, though. Every 14-year-old kid, every 12-year-old kid can be an engineer then, because they can sit down there and you have the most awesome set of Legos that you have. And again, we're not talking about the far out AI nanotech. I mean, this can be things that, slightly larger and much more practical that I think we're going to see in the short term. And that's just, I'm not worried about the future, because I think as more people see that there are all these cool toys to play with, we get awesome things. The internet, was this fantastic outlet for a lot of people who want to write, create, people like us to sit around and talk into microphones and communicate over the inner tubes. And I think that we're going to reach this point with materials technology where it's going to excite a lot of other people. Go look at Kickstarter and see, all the people there who are very excited about being able to share these things with other people and have access to capital. And when the tools get better, I just think we're going to have more of it.
Well, it's quite a leap past 3D printers, isn't it? In other words, you don't need the printer. You've got the material, and maybe you need some kind of programming device to activate it and make it take a shape. And it could work similar to 3D printers in that respect of downloading templates, et cetera, and having to create things. But it's pretty fascinating. Go ahead, Scott.
About once a month, I have a brain fart moment with myself where I will for whatever reason, my mind will drift to this table in front of me or some object in the room, but then we'll say this table, for example. And I just get to thinking real deep about how that solid surface, this thing I do stuff on, this convenient structure is made up of billions upon billions of moving parts, really. But they're moving it at such a rate and in such a fashion that they create this solid surface, and it holds its shape. It doesn't fly. It doesn't just fly to pieces at any given time. And I think about that a lot, and how water is really just that, but just different molecules, different kinds, different speed, different stuff. And every object in this room are all using these different properties.
Even your internet connection is made up of unstable elements.
Have you played with like Google's SketchUp?
No, I know about it. A tiny bit, yeah.
It is. Google just sold SketchUp, but you can still get it for free. It's a 3D design program that it's just 30 minutes of instruction. You can start to design things, and it's very easy. It's designed for anybody from architects to 8-year-olds can use this to build stuff. And people can take Google SketchUp models and put it into 3D printers now. And it's an amazing power because you start sitting in there in Google SketchUp, the next thing you know, you're making an engine, you're making a camshaft, you're making all these incredible things. And what Scott was talking about, I kind of step out of that sometimes and I look at reality and I go, why isn't it malleable like this is? And I think we're going to get there.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what this kind of material that you're talking about can lead to. And I don't know exactly where Scott was going, and we'll get him back here in a second. But yeah, when you look at surfaces and you think, well, that's just empty space with a little bit of matter sprinkled around it to give it some shape and form. And then you start thinking about the sand where it's like, well, this is just a little bit of matter that I can now sprinkle in whatever way I want. It's a pretty powerful thought. Scott, go ahead and pick up. You were saying you look at the table and it's matter and it's not different than water. And
yeah, all I was getting at is that we've gotten so good at taking. I don't know if this part got across, but we're really good at taking raw material. Say it's plastic or let's say resin or something, and that's made up of a whole bunch of things and a whole bunch of properties, atoms and molecules and whatnot, and it behaves in a certain way. So we've been able to get real good at saying, well, since that is a nice solid surface, let's take this quote unquote resin, which is kind of a cousin of plastic and all these other sort of properties, and let's make a statue out of it, or let's make something out of it. And then we just have not, I just can't believe we as human beings have not gotten to the point where we can tell the raw atomic particles what to do yet. Like, it just seems like a thing we should have figured out. And I realize that this prediction is saying we'll be able to do that, but it's odd to me that we still haven't done it on even some basic level. I mean, we've done things like, well, let's have them react to electricity or speed or other atoms being introduced and have them collide and let's see what that does. I mean, that's all the stuff we're doing, but it's so chaotic. It doesn't have any control. And if we're going to be worth our salt as human beings, I just feel like we got to figure out a way to say form of a chair and have it freaking form of a chair. We had to get Wonder Twin powers activated all across devices, tables, chairs, and other home devices.
We've been able to take individual atoms and spell out the letters IBM.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
It's up, down, strange, charm, put them in different relationships, top, bottom. How hard is it, right? Take the quarks, rearrange them. Come on, people.
Yeah, until I was 18, I thought a quark was a sound made by a dirk. So...
And then you watch Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And you realize
think about it. It's just, even you guys talking about it now, I'm still having the brain fart. It's like all this stuff holding together, Tom. I'm looking around. There's this glass on the table here. There's this mouse mat over here I'm not using currently. There's that chair and that rug the chair's on. Why aren't they at any I know there's, whatever.
Scott is not high either.
No, he's not.
I'm totally not high.
Whoa,
but
it's like they're not together.
They're not just flying apart, and I'm not just covered in like cardboard particles from this. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Anyway, continue.
All right. Well, I think we should continue into 4 questions. What do you think?
Whoa, man! Now you're blowing my mind. Hey, it's 4 questions time, everybody. This is where we ask 4 questions of our guests. We do it rapid fire style, and we do it each and every week. They do not have a chance to think too hard about these questions, and even though they're returning guests, they must answer from the gut. John will be asking you my questions. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Do you just like how it looks, or do you have some insider info about the future where all will be bald? And it is those with hair that will be shunned from society.
I have seen the future, and it is follicle-free.
All right.
Are you an observer?
That means that beard's going away. Next question. When we lose all power and the ability to communicate during the robot holocaust, how will you communicate with your neighbors and fellow members of the human rebellion?
I will go to the most basic, primitive, and passionate form of communication, interpretive dance.
Yeah, but your arms and your legs will be rebelling against you.
Well, it'll be a very interesting interpretation then, won't it?
I guess it will. You're right.
We've won the Battle of San Fernando. How do you know? He's dancing. We can totally tell.
He's dancing about architecture.
Next question. What voice actor do you hope plays you in the animated version of your life?
Billy West.
Nice.
Oh, great. He'd be the perfect
Easy.
choice. Yeah. And then finally, your superhero mutation of choice. Flight. Well, this is for transportation. So superhero mutation for transportation of choice. Flight, super speed, super leaping, or teleportation.
Oh, no. It's got to be flight. I mean, teleportation would be, of course, the instantaneous way of getting somewhere. But if someone just moved a table 3 inches to the left, next thing you know, your shin is cut in half. I'd prefer to fly and have that joy of the experience getting from point A to point B.
You have answered correctly, and you may now leave the monastery. Congratulations, Tom. It's all to you now.
The princess is in another castle. Andrew Mayne, are you sitting comfortably?
Yes, I'm actually sitting Indian style.
Good, then we'll begin. Question number 1. You, sir, are the author of the Chronological Man series. How many time traveler visitors are there in the world right now?
7, 8.
They can,
Well, another 6.
Yeah, I imagine it fluctuates.
4. Yeah.
Yeah. Question number 2. Where will the next Silicon Valley be?
Cupertino.
But that's in Silicon Valley, though.
Israel.
Yeah. I see, because you just went to Israel, so it's hard to...
More startups per capita there than any other country in the world.
That's good, yeah, absolutely. Question number 3. Finish this progression of Earth domination. We had the eukaryotes, and then the dinosaurs, and then the humans, and then the...
Chimpanzees.
Chimps come back.
Yes,
yeah, they do.
Listen, for most of human history, there were at least 3 different hominids living.
Yeah, I probably, I skipped over a lot of dominant species in there. So I want to apologize to any of you who are of those species. Dolphins.
The Denisovians and the Neanderthals, we apologize.
Yeah, exactly. But all right. So it's a chimp. So it's kind of mammal-centric prediction there, though.
Yeah, I mean, mammals succeeded in the way they have for a reason. I mean, bats are like the most popular species there is, next to bats and beetles.
I would think a marsupial future is not out of the question, but it's a good point.
I got to say that the most popular kids in my school were all bats, so that's also true.
That was a gang where John grew up. Question number 4. What will be the most popular sport in 1,000 years?
Free donk.
Yeah, I love that game.
Yeah. Free donk is great.
Excellent. Well, yeah, that is your 4 questions. Thank you, Andrew Mayne.
Thank you. Can I just, to touch on John's just for a second, let me tell you the advantage of teleportation, though, John, is if you're like that glider guy, you can teleport really high and then glide, and then you get the flight thing, and then you get teleportation. It's a 2-for-1. Just think about it.
Yeah, I see. I have this innate distrust about pulling apart my atoms and recombining them somewhere. I'm worried that I would actually be a new person and not the person that I am right now. I take all my cues from Bones McCoy.
But if you are a different person, but you can't tell the difference, does it matter?
In Andrew's scenario, I don't like that one either, because you're floating around. You're like, all right, time to do the teleportation phase. Oh, no, there's a seagull in my chest cavity because he was flying there at that moment. That's a terrible idea. Don't do that.
That'll ruin your whole day.
Some versions of teleportation, you're tunneling and you just sort of pop whatever's out away. There's It's been thought of. Of course, you could maybe cause a nuclear explosion too when you actually merge, the cores of a couple nucleus. That would be bad. It could be side effects.
Yeah. There's always downsides to everything, right? I mean, we can focus on the negatives here,
But if we're living in caves in the future, what good is flying? Just saying.
What if my cave is really high up on the mountain?
Because he's trying to get away from all you annoying people who are trying to make him teleport all the time.
Not all caves are at sea level.
That's a good point.
Take that.
All right.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been fun. Andrew Mayne is the author of many books. I mentioned the Chronological Man series, but his latest is Angel Killer. That you can get that at andrewmainebooks.com, right?
Yeah, the links are there. It's at Amazon right now. It's special, just 99 cents. It's been described as, this was my favorite description, Silence of the Lambs meets The Prestige.
Wow.
So if you wanted to see a very scary serial killer, like with John Strickland level intelligence, using technology to menace and frighten people, which John is capable of doing, check out Angel Killer. And Absolutely. I got a podcast. I just want to say, I've got Andrew Mayne Stories is the new podcast. We have normally Justin Robert Young narrates them, but we have a very special narrator. This is a new personality. We're trying to break into the world of podcasting. Veronica Belmont.
It's Belmont. She's French.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Belmont. Yeah.
Belmont. So.
Damn it. I got her to read a part of Boiling Point, United Moon Colonies, and I've got to finish publishing it. You've beaten me to the punch. Put Veronica on there. That's awesome.
She did a great job. Great job.
AndrewMainebooks.com.
Can I just say one thing about The Prestige real fast? That is the only Batman versus Wolverine movie we're ever going to get. Think about it. You see where I'm coming from, Tom?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm thinking about it. I see where you're coming from. John Strickland, HowStuffWorks.com, the Tech Stuff Podcast, and Man About the Internet. Anything special to tell folks about going on?
Well, let's see. You know what? I'm going to plug something I have never plugged on TWiT before.
This has never happened before, folks.
I do a really silly show occasionally with Ayaz Akhtar and Eric Sandine called Podcast Without Pretense. And we just talk about whatever comes to mind as soon as we hit record, and it's about as good as I just explained it. So I love seeing our numbers. That's one of our things we do is we talk about how many listeners we have. And it appears that the longer we go without recording, the higher our listener numbers go. And then as soon as we do a show, they plummet. So I would like everyone listening to go listen to a show just to give our numbers that boost, that it goes higher than ever before, and then just stop listening. It's fine.
Podcast Without Pretense is what I call a podcast without portfolio, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a specific topic or anything. It's just a good conversation.
We break all the rules of podcasting. We do not record every single week because sometimes stuff comes up, so we have never been very consistent. We do not have a plan when we start recording. We do not make sure that we know what we're talking about before we start recording. All the rules of podcasting to help build a listenership, we break those, and it shows.
Because I do East Meets West, very similar. There's Tangential Convergence, which I don't know if Dave Broadbeck has done an episode in a while. Same idea. No Agenda, John Dvorak, same sort of thing. Even You Look Nice Today, which I don't think they're doing that anymore. But same sort of idea. It's one of my favorite kinds of podcasts. It's the unpodcast.
Right.
It's pretty awesome. So where can they find it again?
Search for Podcast Without Pretense. It's actually on Ayaz's site. So if you go to ayaz.me, you can find it if you search around enough.
Withoutpretense.posturous.com. Is that you?
See, there's another podcast called Pretentious Podcasters.
Oh, that's a different one.
Like
Don't go
fight.
there. Go to ayaz.me. All right.
Yeah. No, we'll put pretense into the podcast occasionally, which also is another rule that we break. We actually break the rule of doing the opposite of what the title of your podcast is.
Excellent.
I would love the idea if the podcast was actually you guys talking about what the podcast is not going to be. It was like this meta, description of it.
Yeah, it can get that way.
Scott Johnson, Nerdtacular approacheth.
It does. There are very few tickets left if anyone else is seriously planning on coming. But it is looking awesome. Very excited. Everything is coming together. As George Papard once said, he loves it when a plan comes together. And Nerdtacular is certainly coming together. It comes only once a year. It's like Christmas, June 23rd in June. That's what I just said, isn't it?
I don't know if it's better than Christmas, but
it's close. Come on,
does Christmas have Paul and Storm and John and Neelio? Does Christmas have all the best hosts from Frog Pants? I don't know.
Does it have Tom Merritt and America's favorite wood imp, Veronica Belmont, doing a panel for Sword and Laser? No.
Heck,
none of these things are true.
I will be there. But
does
John
Christmas
Strickland
have
will
John
be there.
Strickland guaranteed to be there?
And his beard will be there.
That's true.
Both ends of it.
Both sides.
And so it's going to be fantastic. I can't freaking wait. If you we're actually giving away a pair of tickets this week on the morning stream, the morning show for the Frog Pants Network. So if you're interested in that or any other details regarding the event itself, go to nerdtacular.com. And for everything else, just go to frogpants.com. All the shows are there, all the stuff we're doing, including Tom and mine and Tom's new show, Autopilot, where this week I want to say we did Emergency. Who do we do this week? I forgot the show. Do you remember the show?
Well, it's not Sequest to DSV.
Well, then it would be.
That's 2 weeks from now.
It'd be Buck Rogers, Dirk Benedict,
Rogers in the 25th
and
century.
the 25th century. Exactly. Right. So watch for that. It's going to be fantastic.
All right, folks, that's it for this episode of FourCast. Thanks for watching or listening. So you can find us on the web at fourcastpodcast.com, and you can send us emails to fourcast@twit.tv. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
But it's only 32 years away.